They dragged him out of first class in front of everyone, but 15 minutes later, his dad walked on the plane and the entire cabin went silent. Jalen Harris had been counting down the days since the email came through. That acceptance letter from Stanford wasn't just a dream come true. It was his ticket to a whole new world. And today felt like the first taste of it. He stared at his reflection in the tinted glass of the terminal window at Dallas Love Field Airport. 16 years old, fresh fade, hoodie over his head, and those spotless sneakers he'd begged his dad for last Christmas. The kid staring back at him looked calm, but inside, his heart was doing somersaults. "Man, first class?" he whispered under his breath, smiling at the thought. His father, Darius Harris, had called him just 2 nights ago. "Jay, you earned this. Straight A's all year, you stayed out of trouble. I want you to fly in style this time, no arguments." No arguments, like Jalen would have argued. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about his dad noticing his effort, rewarding him for it. It was about proving, in his own quiet way, that he belonged wherever life took him. Jalen shifted his backpack and looked at the first-class ticket in his hand for the 100th time. He liked the way it felt, thick, premium paper with his name printed bold, Jalen Harris. "Boarding Group 1, that's me," he said softly. But as much as he wanted to play it cool, the stares around him weren't making it easy. A few travelers glanced at him like he'd wandered into the wrong part of the terminal. One guy, maybe mid-50s in a crisp golf polo, didn't even bother hiding it. His eyes traveled from Jalen's sneakers to his hoodie, then up to his face and landed back on the ticket in Jalen's hand. Jalen felt the heat in his ears. He pretended to scroll through his phone, earbuds in but no music playing. He didn't want to give anyone a reason to think he didn't belong here. The announcement came through the overhead speakers. "First-class passengers, you may now board." Jalen took a deep breath and stepped forward. His legs felt like they were moving in slow motion. Every step echoed like a question. "You sure you're supposed to be here?" When the gate agent scanned his ticket, she gave him a quick smile. That helped. "Enjoy your flight," she said. For a second, the tension in his chest loosened. Walking down that jet bridge, Jalen felt like he was walking into the future. Plush seats, polished wood accents, and that subtle scent of leather and fresh coffee greeted him. This wasn't economy. This was different. He slid into seat 3A and ran his fingers over the smooth armrest. A blanket folded like origami. A glass of water already waiting. This was everything he imagined. Jalen put on his headphones, leaned back, and whispered to himself, "I made it." But just as he started to settle in, someone's shadow fell across his seat. And that's when things started to change. Jalen looked up, pulling one earbud down. A flight attendant stood there, her smile tight like it had been stapled on. Her eyes swept over him, quick and sharp, like she was scanning for a mistake. "Good afternoon," she said, but her voice didn't match the words. It sounded more like a question than a greeting. Jalen forced a smile back. "Hey. Can I see your boarding pass again?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Jalen blinked. Sure." He dug into the pocket of his hoodie and handed her the ticket, the one she could have seen when he boarded, the one the gate agent already scanned without a problem. She took it, looked at it, then looked at him again. Seat 3A. "That's right here," Jalen said, his voice steady but his chest tightening. The attendant gave another clipped smile. "Yes, of course. Thank you." She handed it back like it was contaminated. Then without another word, she moved on down the aisle. Jalen slipped his earbuds back in, but there was no music, just silence and the heavy thud of his heartbeat. He tried to shake it off, but then came the whispers. Across the aisle, a woman in a cream blazer leaned toward the man next to her. Jalen didn't catch every word, but he heard enough. "Kids these days, first class, doesn't look..." He turned his head toward the window, jaw tight. He didn't need to hear the rest. He'd heard it before, just not here. Not in a place that was supposed to feel like success. Another man, maybe in his 60s, with a tablet balanced on his lap, gave Jalen a long look. Not a friendly one. The kind of look that asked, "How did you afford this?" Jalen took a slow breath. His father's words echoed in his head. "You earned this. Don't let anybody make you feel small." The seatbelt sign chimed overhead. The cabin filled with the soft sounds of luggage being stowed, seatbelts clicking. Jalen tried to blend in, scrolling through his phone like everyone else, but the tension in his shoulders wouldn't ease. The attendant returned a few minutes later. Same smile, same energy. But this time she had company, a male flight attendant with a tablet in his hand. "Sir," the man said, polite but firm, "can we speak with you for a moment?" Jalen frowned. Sure." He pulled off his headphones. "Is there a problem?" The woman spoke this time, her voice low, like she didn't want others to hear, but loud enough for the front row to catch. "There seems to be a mistake with your seating assignment." Jalen's stomach sank. "A mistake? This is my seat. 3A. He held out his ticket like proof in a trial. "Yes, I see that," the man said, glancing at the tablet. "But could you step into the aisle so we can confirm?" Jalen felt the eyes, all of them, watching, judging. He could practically hear their thoughts, knew it. He doesn't belong here. He stood slowly, the weight of embarrassment pressing on his chest. This doesn't make sense," he muttered. But the worst part? The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were sentences, and they were about him. Jalen stepped into the aisle, clutching his boarding pass like it was the last piece of proof that he wasn't crazy. His sneakers squeaked softly against the carpet as he followed the attendants toward the galley. Every step felt heavier than the last. He didn't look back, but he could feel the stairs drilling into his back. Snickers, whispers, words like figures and, of course, floating just loud enough for him to catch pieces of. His throat tightened. The male attendant glanced at the tablet again and then at Jalen. "Sir, this ticket, where did you get it?" Jalen's eyebrows shot up. "What? My dad bought it for me. Why?" The woman crossed her arms. "It's unusual for someone your age to be in first class alone. We've had incidents before." Jalen blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Unusual? So what are you saying? That I don't belong here?" "No one said that," the man said quickly, but his tone had that corporate calm that made it worse. Jalen's voice cracked just a little, but he pushed through it. "You literally pulled me out of my seat in front of everyone. For what? To humiliate me?" The woman sighed, soft but sharp. "Sir, if you can just cooperate, we can clear this up." Jalen shoved the ticket toward her. "Here, look again, seat 3A. She took it like it burned her fingers and scanned it against her tablet. A soft beep confirmed what Jalen already knew. Everything was fine. The man nodded slowly. "It checks out, but what?" Jalen snapped. His voice carried this time. Heads turned, phones tilted just slightly, recording. The attendant lowered his voice. "Sir, we've had cases of people using someone else's ticket to access first class. It's protocol." Jalen stared at him, disbelief washing over his face. "You think I stole a ticket? Is that what this is?" Neither of them answered. That was all the answer he needed. His chest tightened like a fist. He felt every pair of eyes waiting, watching, judging. He could walk back and sit down like nothing happened, but that wasn't an option anymore. Jalen took a slow breath. "Look, my dad bought that ticket for me. I didn't do anything wrong." The woman's tone softened, like pity instead of respect. "We understand, sir, but we can't allow you to remain in first class until this is fully verified. For now, you'll need to move to economy. Just for now." Jalen's stomach dropped. "Are you serious? After all this? I showed you my ticket." "It's temporary," the man said, gesturing down the aisle. "We'll make sure you're comfortable." Comfortable? In the back of the plane. After everyone just watched him get dragged out. Jalen wanted to argue, to shout, to tell them how wrong this was, but the eyes were still on him. The murmurs were louder now. One woman whispered, not even trying to hide it. "Knew it. He didn't pay for that." He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of 1,000 judgments he didn't deserve. Finally, Jalen nodded, barely holding his voice steady. "Fine." He grabbed his backpack, heart pounding so loud, it drowned everything else out. As he walked past those leather seats and expensive suits, he caught fragments of conversations. Somebody tried to cheat the system. Figures, right? Every word was a knife. But as Jalen slid into an economy seat, staring at the seat back in front of him, he had no idea what was about to happen 15 minutes later, when the man who bought that ticket walked onto the plane. Jalen kept his head low as he walked toward the back of the plane, gripping his backpack so tight his knuckles turned white. Every step felt like a marathon, and the aisle seemed to stretch forever. The whispering didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder now that he was passing the rows. "Guess he thought he could get away with it," a man in a navy blazer murmured, loud enough for Jalen to hear. Jalen clenched his jaw and kept moving. He wanted to spin around and shout, "You don't know me, you don't know anything about me." But he didn't. He just kept walking. A woman in 6C gave him a sympathetic smile, the kind that felt worse than the judgmental stares, like she was saying, "Poor kid, must have been embarrassing for you." Finally, Jalen reached row 21. The cramped seats, the faded blue fabric, the faint smell of reheated food. This wasn't just economy, it felt like exile. He slid into the middle seat, pressing his backpack to his chest like a shield. As he buckled in, he stared at the screen on the seat back in front of him. The bright safety video played, but he didn't see it. His vision blurred with frustration and shame. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his dad. "Flight board yet? You good?" Jalen stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the screen. What was he supposed to say? "Yeah, Dad, everything's fine, except they just dragged me out of first class like I'm a criminal." Instead, he typed, "Yeah, just waiting for takeoff." He hit send and leaned his head back against the seat. He didn't want to make his dad mad. Darius had gone out of his way to make this trip special. Jalen didn't want to ruin it. The attendant came by, checking seatbelts. When she reached Jalen, she gave him the kind of smile people use when they've decided you're a problem, but they don't want you to know it. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. Jalen shook his head without looking at her. "I'm good." The plane vibrated slightly as the engines roared to life. People settled in, adjusting headphones, tapping on tablets. Jalen stared out the window, watching the ground crew moving like tiny ants below. His reflection stared back at him, a kid who suddenly felt smaller than ever. He replayed the moment, over and over, the stares, the whispers, the humiliation. He wondered if anyone had recorded it, if he'd end up on some viral clip titled "Teen Kicked Out of First Class." Jalen's chest burned with anger, but underneath that was something heavier. Hurt. He didn't care about the seat anymore. It wasn't about that. It was about what they saw when they looked at him and what they assumed. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers, announcing a slight delay before departure. Jalen sighed and closed his eyes, wishing the flight would just start so this nightmare could be over. But while Jalen sat there trying to disappear, the man who raised him, the man who paid for that seat, was stepping onto the jet bridge, and he was about to change everything. The jet bridge door opened with a soft thud, and in walked Darius Harris, calm, collected, every step measured like a man who knew exactly who he was. He wasn't flashy. No gold chains, no loud designer logos. Just a tailored navy suit, a sleek leather briefcase in hand, and a quiet presence that made people notice without him even trying. The gate agent greeted him with a professional smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harris. Thank you for flying with us." Darius nodded politely. "Thank you." His voice was deep, steady, the kind that made people stop and listen. As he walked down the jet bridge, he pulled out his phone. A text from Jalen lit up the screen. "Yeah, just waiting for takeoff." Good, Darius thought. He smiled faintly. He was proud of that boy, worked hard all year, earned this reward. First class was just his way of saying, "I see you, son. You deserve this." But when Darius stepped into the first class cabin and glanced at seat 3A, his smile faded. Empty. Blanket still folded, water still untouched. His brow furrowed. He checked the boarding pass in his pocket, 3A. The same seat number Jalen had sent him a picture of. Darius turned to the flight attendant who'd been greeting passengers near the front. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "My son should be sitting in 3A, Jalen Harris. Have you seen him?" The attendant's expression flickered just for a second. She straightened her posture. Yes, sir. There was an issue with his ticket, so we moved him to economy." Darius's gaze stayed on her, steady and sharp. "An issue?" "Yes, sir. It was just a precaution. Everything's fine now." "A precaution for what?" Darius's tone didn't rise, but it tightened, like a rope pulling taut. The attendant hesitated, glancing at her colleague across the aisle. The other one, the guy with the tablet, approached quickly. "Sir, we can explain. Your son's ticket appeared." "Appeared what?" Darius asked, voice calm but cutting through the hum of the cabin. A few heads turned. Passengers who'd been pretending not to listen were now hanging on every word. The male attendant cleared his throat. There was some confusion. We weren't sure the ticket was valid. Darius tilted his head slightly. Not valid. I bought that ticket myself, directly through your airline's app, on my Platinum account. So tell me, what exactly made you unsure? Silence. The attendant shifted, eyes darting. Sir, as I said, it was just protocol. Protocol, Darius repeated, slow and deliberate. Protocol for removing a paying customer from the seat they purchased, humiliating them in front of an entire cabin and sending them to the back of the plane? The attendant swallowed hard. Sir, we didn't mean... You didn't mean what? Darius's voice was still calm, but there was something behind it now. A controlled fire. The kind that made everyone in earshot sit a little straighter. You didn't mean to treat my son like a criminal? Or you didn't mean to assume that because he's 16, wearing a hoodie, and sitting in first class, he doesn't belong here? The cabin went dead silent. The woman in the cream blazer who'd whispered earlier stared down at her phone. The man in the navy blazer shifted uncomfortably. No one was breathing too loud. The male attendant opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Sir, we apologize for the misunderstanding. Darius let the words hang in the air, like he was weighing them. Then he said, quietly but firmly, Go get my son, now. The attendant nodded quickly, motioning to the back of the plane. Darius stepped aside, his jaw tight, his eyes following him until he disappeared down the aisle. But as Darius waited, the weight of what just happened was starting to hit the entire cabin, and it was only going to get heavier when Jalen walked back up that aisle. The aisle was quiet as the male attendant reappeared from the back, and behind him, Jalen followed, backpack slung over his shoulder, face blank like a mask hiding a storm. His sneakers dragged a little against the carpet. Every step toward first class felt heavier than the walk he'd just taken to the back. Eyes turned. Some passengers looked away quickly, guilt creeping into their expressions. Others stared, their curiosity naked and shameless. The same man who whispered figures earlier suddenly found the tray table fascinating. Jalen didn't say a word as he reached row 3. He stopped next to Darius, who placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. That simple touch said everything. You're not alone anymore. You good? Darius asked, his voice low but steady. Jalen nodded once, but his eyes said something else. Something like, why did this happen? Darius turned to the two attendants standing nearby. His calm hadn't broken, but now his words carried weight. So, here's what's going to happen. My son is going to sit in the seat I paid for, right here, and I expect an explanation for why that didn't happen in the first place. Sir, the female attendant started, but Darius cut her off with a glance. Not loud, not angry, just final. I'm listening, he said. The male attendant cleared his throat. As we said, it was protocol. His ticket was flagged for verification, and protocol, Darius repeated, his tone sharp enough to slice through the excuses. Funny how protocol only seems to apply to certain people, isn't it? The words hung heavy. A couple of passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. The attendant's face flushed. Sir, it wasn't personal. Darius tilted his head. Wasn't personal. You pulled my son out of his seat. You walked him past a cabin full of strangers and made him sit in the back of the plane like he'd done something wrong. Tell me, how is that not personal? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, full of shame, full of truth that nobody wanted to touch. The woman in the cream blazer finally spoke, her voice soft, hesitant. Sir, I'm so sorry for what happened to your son. Darius didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed on the attendants. Sorry doesn't fix humiliation. Sorry doesn't erase judgment. My son is 16. He's worked hard to earn every opportunity he's been given. And what did you teach him today? That no matter what he achieves, someone will always look at him and assume the worst? Jalen's throat tightened. Hearing his father say the words out loud, it hit harder than the whispers, harder than the stares. The attendants stood frozen, their faces pale. One managed to stammer, Sir, we'll file an incident report and offer compensation for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? Darius let out a dry laugh. You think this is about money? He stepped closer, voice low but clear. This is about respect. It's about dignity. Two things my son will never let anyone take from him. Isn't that right, Jay? Jalen lifted his chin, meeting his father's gaze. Yeah, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. That's right. Darius turned back to the attendants, his expression calm again, but unshakable. Now, unless you plan on making another mistake, I suggest you let us enjoy the flight in peace. The attendants nodded quickly, stepping back like chess pieces retreating from a king. Darius guided Jalen to seat 3A. As Jalen sat down, he could feel the shift in the cabin. The same passengers who'd stared before were silent now, some embarrassed, some humbled. No one dared to make eye contact. Darius slid into the seat next to his son. You hungry? He asked, as if they'd just gotten there. Jalen smirked faintly. Kinda. Darius smiled, calm as ever. Good. Let's see what they've got on this menu. But as the plane prepared for takeoff, there was one more thing Darius needed to say. Something that would stay with Jalen forever. The engines rumbled as the plane rolled toward the runway, but inside, the cabin was so quiet you could hear the click of a seatbelt 2 rows back. Jalen sat staring at the seat in front of him, still replaying everything that happened. His father's calm voice broke through his thoughts. You know why I booked that ticket for you? Jalen shrugged, trying to play it off. 'Cause you wanted me to experience first class? Darius chuckled softly. Not just that. I wanted you to understand something. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I know who you are, Jay. I know what you've worked for. You earned that seat. Jalen nodded slowly, staring at his hands. But it didn't matter to them. They looked at me and saw something else. Darius turned toward him, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fire. That's the world sometimes. People will judge you before you open your mouth, before they know your story. You can't control that. But what you can control is what you do after. You don't shrink. You don't let them take your pride. You stand tall. Always. Jalen swallowed hard. It just felt so unfair. It was unfair, Darius said without hesitation. But life isn't always fair. That doesn't mean you give up your seat, figuratively or literally, because someone thinks you don't belong there. You fight for it. And when you earn it, you own it. Jalen looked at his dad, the anger in his chest softening, replaced by something stronger, resolve. Okay, he said quietly. I get it. Darius smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Good. Now, order something fancy. Let's make them work for that apology. Jalen cracked a laugh, small but real. For the first time since he boarded, he felt like himself again. As the plane lifted off the ground, Jalen stared out the window at the clouds, his father's words echoing in his head. You don't shrink. You stand tall. And maybe that was the real first-class experience. Not the seat, not the service, but knowing your worth when the world tries to question it. Respect isn't tied to where you sit, what you wear, or how old you are. Don't let assumptions define your value. If you've worked hard and earned your place, claim it, own it. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a time someone doubted you, share it. Leave a comment with what you'd say if you were in Jalen's shoes. And never forget, you belong in every room you've worked to enter.